Yep, the 8th of November. Well, hands up all those of you who can hear me on this broadcast, because I've been having a lot of trouble with sound on my broadcasts until recently. So I'm trying a little experiment today. Let me know if you're able to hear me or not. In the meantime, I'm going to plough on and just give you a very brief overview of the situation at the moment. And there is a lot of talk just now about the so-called supermajority. People have been posing the idea of the SNP not standing candidates in the regional lists in order to allow other parties such as ALPA, ISP, and others, small parties, to pick up more seats in the list, including the Greens. Now, some people have been looking at Grok and trying to figure out whether there is a possibility of picking up a supermajority by doing this. And actually, it's beginning to look as though a supermajority would be possible. Asking AI systems whether, if the SNP were to abandon the idea of standing candidates in the list, what would happen? Of the two AI systems that were questioned, both of them said that it would result in a pro-independence majority numbering some 90-something seats. Could be as high as 99, it could be 94, but either way, it would be a huge majority in Parliament in Edinburgh for independence. Now, these so-called plebiscite elections have been mooted a number of times, and many people have written them off, saying there is no way that the United Kingdom would ever recognise them. And that is probably true, actually, because until there is some recognition at the UN that Scotland wants to be decolonised and isn't happy being in the Union, and that is recognised by other countries within the UN, there's very little chance of a plebiscite election, however successful, of managing to produce a majority which the UN would recognise, despite the fact that we might gain a huge majority of the seats. Remember, there's only 129 seats in Holyrood, and if you're taking 99 of those, then it is a supermajority, and it's a huge one. So, yes, it's possible to gain a supermajority, but right at the moment, until the UN actually recognises that Scotland wants to be decolonised and recognises the result of a plebiscite election such as this, there isn't much hope that it would have any effect. The UK would just shrug and say, well, it's just a general election, it doesn't mean anything, and carry on as if nothing had happened. However, if the UN were to take a position on it, say, well, hang on a minute, we now recognise Scotland as a colony, as a non-self-governing territory, that changes the entire argument completely, because now Scotland is seeking decolonisation. Our decolonisation committee, the C24 committee, would recognise that fact. And if the Scots decided to have a plebiscite election and all of the parties agreed to do it, then the result would be a meaningful vote which would express that people settled well on the matter. And that would be the end of it, because the UN would recognise the result. But it depends on two things. And the two things it depends upon would be, first of all, getting the UN backing first, because without the UN backing, I don't believe that the SNP would agree to this kind of plebiscite election, because they would have to agree not to stand in the list seats to clear the way for the minor independence parties, the smaller ones, to gain as many seats as possible. Now, having said that, if the SNP were convinced that the UN was behind it, then it might be possible to achieve this. But a lot rides on what is happening with Liberation Scotland at the UN. Salvo has made some initial approaches to the UN, which we've already seen. And despite the really weird attempts to sabotage this in various quarters, it's still ongoing. And that means that Salvo and Liberation Scotland are continuing with their efforts to put together a comprehensive dossier of historical and political evidence which supports the argument that Scotland is in fact a colony of the United Kingdom. It's not an equal partner. And I think that can be amply demonstrated by the collected history of both countries over the last 300 years. So we need, unfortunately, to wait. It's not the time at the moment for a supermajority.